Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. And from the home of the world champion Houston Astros, might I add, Robert, along with Sports Radio 610's Shaun Bijani, 45 years in journalism between the two of us, over 35 years covering Houston sports. And Shaun, owner Jim Crane and GM Jim Crane signed three-time All-Star and former MVP first baseman Jose Abreu to a 3-year, $58.5 million deal. He'll be 36 next year. Are you thumbs up or thumbs down on the deal?
I'm thumbs up on the deal. If there's a slight decline in his numbers, and you really kind of have to look to the in-depth numbers in terms of what he was doing against fastballs, high fastballs, not pulling as many baseballs on higher velocity pitches, that kind of stuff. Maybe there's a decline, but I'd also like to hear from the guy himself too, who maybe made an adjustment, and that just happened to be kind of the result of said adjustment, because his overall power numbers are still pretty darn good. He hit 40 doubles. He's only done that twice in his career. The 15 homers, if you translate that to the type of season he had in Chicago to what it could have been if he would have been an Astro, they go to 22 home runs. And you just never know, the look of the ballpark, the feel of the ballpark, the team. We know the White Sox were an absolute disaster for much of the season under Tony La Russa before he'd stepped out, and didn't get much better when he did. So I think, in relation to all of those things that I just said, my short answer is yes, absolutely. I don't worry so much about age these days because sports science is so great, because nutrition is so great, and guys are taking better care of their bodies more nowadays than ever before. And I do like the fact that while the Houston Astros might lose Justin Verlander, one of the most appealing reasons, I think, for Justin Verlander to stick around as long as he did here in Houston is because of the sports science department, because of the training staff, because of the doctors that he'd had at his disposal. So all of those things, when you're talking about an aging player, in their mid to late 30s, as Jose Abreu will be during his time here with the Houston Astros, you have to feel really good about all of those things.
Let's go through some of his career stats, because you get excited when you see 860 career OPS with runners in scoring position, 943. Wow. Versus righties, 841. Versus lefties, 925. This is all OPS. So this is good stuff. Postseason OPS. Oh yeah, that's pretty good too. 871. At Minute Maid Park, his career is a 590 OPS, but factor in, he was facing the Astros pitching. So you kind of have to throw a little bit of that out the window. As far as the 3-year contract goes, Shaun, yes, it could fall off a cliff at any time. I mean, you've got a guy that's in his late 30s, 3 years, maybe 1 year too long, but keep in mind the contracts of Altuve and Bregman end in 2 years. So Shaun, I assume Jim Crane might see the next 2 years as the last of the dynasty window, because you can't assume that Altuve and Bregman are going to re-sign with the Astros at that point in their careers.
Hey, you can't assume that they will, and you can't really assume that you would necessarily want them to either, because 2 years, there's a lot of baseball to be played between now and then. And, that to a degree hurts me to even say, and it probably smarts even more to actually hear it. What do you mean you wouldn't want Altuve? What do you mean you wouldn't want Bregman? Well, I mean, you think about the players that you've lost. I mean, just take yourself emotionally away from the situation. You've lost George Springer. You've lost Carlos Correa. You've lost Dallas Keuchel. You've lost Garrett Cole, who didn't have that much of an emotional attachment with the fans. Really wasn't even a two-way street, to be quite honest with you, as the representative of himself would tell you probably. But
the thing is, what you know about the Astros, what we have seen with Jim Crane is guys in the prime of their career towards the middle to back end of their career, he doesn't want to give more than 2 or 3 year contracts. That's right. Why Springer left. That's why Correa left. That's why, Garrett Cole left. He's not going to do that. I mean, this was a 3-year contract. That's about as far as he's going to go, I think, when you're in your 30s.
It's a really good point. And you maybe you think about how quickly relationships, as strong as they are at their apex, sometimes can sour. And I can't really think of a great example under this regime or even the previous one, to be quite honest with you, as an example. But, um, you know, Altuve and Bregman and even Jordan, to be honest with you, Robert, all three of those guys, considering what they've done for their careers and the years since they'd signed those deals, probably could have gotten a hell of a lot more on an open market. But, they love the city of Houston. They love the Astros. They love the organization. They saw the promise. They saw the future potential of winning multiple championships, and it's come to fruition. And there might even be more in sight. And so maybe towards the end of those deals, when they are looking at hitting the open market again in their early to mid, even to late 30s at those respective times with those three individuals that I just talked about, maybe they do take it all into account and say, you know what, I signed a really team friendly deal then, but boy, the market is sure looking sweet now. Maybe I can get a 2 or 3 or 4 year deal, but a lot more AAV somewhere else than I could in Houston. Somebody's always going to be willing to pay a little bit more than the place from which you'd come from. That's just kind of generally how it's gone. I would never want to see Altuve play in another uniform. I think it's a little bit different in saying that than for a guy like Justin Verlander. I mean, this is a career Houston Astro. And I just do. I'm not going to say it's number one, Robert, and I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this. I just think there is a level of importance there for you to take care of the guys that helped you accomplish what you did as an organization.
And I just remember what happened at the end of Craig Biggio's career, and I know what Altuve did for the organization, but Jim Crane's about winning, and I respect that, because guess what? He's won over and over and over again. And so, could Altuve stick around for a smaller contract and maybe he could get somewhere else? There's a good chance of that, because that seems like that's Altuve's DNA. But I can't get mad if you let Altuve walk. If somebody wants to give Altuve a 5 or 6 year deal when he's age, I don't know, I think he's 34 or something like that at the end of this contract. And Altuve's a guy, he's small. Small guys don't age particularly well. He's not going to be able to sit back and rely on the fact that he's 6'4" and can maybe hit the ball out of the ballpark or something like that.
We've also been saying those same things for a couple of 3 years now about Jose Altuve, and year in and year out, he continues to just do what he does. And I know
he's 32 though now. It's not like he's 36 or whatever,
Really right. But I don't think a lot of people really presumed that he would be doing what he's doing into his 30s. And he's really shown no signs of slowing down. Yes, he struggled in different portions, and some of them were pretty big struggles throughout the course of the last couple of seasons. But damn, the guy hit 340 over the course of the last 25, 26 games. Maybe it was even more than that. I can't remember all the numbers now, but and then obviously the postseason struggles. But I mean, hell, who didn't struggle in the postseason? I mean, he was just kind of like the
I don't want to talk all this about Altuve leaving, because it's this is 2 years away. I'm just bringing that up to point out the Abreu thing. And look, Altuve's 32. He should still be in his prime. But if you're talking about signing Altuve at the age of 34 to a 5 or 6 year contract, and he's 40 years old, and he's a guy that relies on his speed, I'm just saying, Alex Bregman is also a small guy that relies on his quickness and all of those things. I'm not telling you these guys are going to be terrible when they're 36. Yeah. I'm just saying, let's be realistic. You said it off the top. We've seen Garrett Cole leave. We've seen George Springer go. We've seen all of these guys, they're gone. So I'm just saying that. So looking at Jose Abreu and with this way, I mean, like the idea that the Astros are just going to go to the ALCS and World Series every single year forever and ever and ever and ever. Come on, it's not real. This is going to end at some point, and Altuve and Bregman are such a big part of that. It's not just what they do on the field; it's what they do in leading their guys. And yes, at some point, leadership. You can't just keep replacing great players and great leaders over and over and over again like the Astros have done. I think it's really hard when you're stripped of so much of your draft choices and so many of the guys at the lower tiers of the organization that are coming up. I mean, to keep doing this over and over again, it's tricky.
It is. It's very tricky, and it doesn't the way to do it, especially when your draft capital isn't as heavy as lucrative as you would like, is to be able to go out and sign guys at some friendlier deals when they're 27, 28 years old, and you can get them on that 5 to 7 year contract, much like you did a Bregman or an Altuve. They just happen to be in house in Jordan. It doesn't happen all the time. The Astros have some opportunities to do that at various positions now. Whether they're going to do that, coupled with the fact that they've already paid a high price and probably a higher price than they really needed to for a guy like Jose Abreu, maybe they decide to do that with Wilson Contreras, a 30-year-old catcher. I don't know. And how much of a catcher is he really going to be? And is he going to be even paid like a catcher if the Astros sign him? Or is he going to be a DH, left fielder, first base, platoon guy? Who knows? That's kind of what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about tonight. I'm sure you've got it planned in the show, but I'm kind of fascinated with what the Astros have left to do, Robert, because there's quite a bit. And it seems like they're going to continue to do this and get the bulk of it done without an actual general manager in-house. How comfortable are you with that?
I mean, that's where they are right now, but it's not like they've got a ton to do. They got one of the great starting pitching staffs. Even if Verlander goes, they're still fantastic. Their bullpen is set. We know that. The only guy that was of any import free agent wise in the entire pitching staff, they've already signed in Montero. If you look at the starting lineup, Abreu's batting 6 because you're starting off with Altuve and Pena and, Bregman and Jordan and Tucker. And, I mean, they've got one of the best lineups now without catcher. And they did it last year. They won the championship with Maldonado as their catcher. So if Maldonado is going to hit 150 again, and you're going to go to the, World Series, you're going to be confident in Maldonado because guess what? He's Martin Maldonado and he just took you to a World Series and he's the leader out there. And even if you brought out somebody else in, I mean, Dusty's the manager and he loves Maldonado. So if you brought in Yogi Berra in his prime, the guy that's going to the Hall of Fame, Dusty might say, well, I like Maldy better, so I think Wilson Contreras is an option because he can play other positions and he can DH and he can do other things. And so I think that's the benefit of somebody like him, but pretty much that's the big thing. They're trying to get Yuli back to be a utility guy. Aledmus Diaz is a free agent. I assume he's gone. So, Yuli, I think is part of it, but Yuli and the catcher, that's really it as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you've got to look at left field, center field, DH, who's going to be the platoon guy there. If it is going to be Yuli, I don't know if it comes down to this either or between Yuli or Michael Brantley. I've thought about this quite a bit over the last few days, and boy, I tell you, I know the injury issues have kind of been there with Michael Brantley, but the age and the real possibility of a severe decline, even just a year removed from a batting title and Silver Slugger with Yuli Gurriel, that is a possibility as well, along with age, not necessarily the injury history, because that's a guy that went out there day in and day out, banged up or not, and he was going to play and battle through. But I'd like to have Michael Brantley back. I think he adds some really good flexibility there in left field, not having to play Jordan out there on the regular. He gives you the DH option and multiple options on what you want to do at first base or DH, especially if you factor in Wilson Contreras into it, which, he's not here yet, but he certainly could be.
I just don't want Brantley back because I just feel like he's too much of an injury risk. He just doesn't play a lot. He's playing less and less. He's getting more and more injured. You've got a left fielder DH right now that is an injury risk himself and Jordan and somebody that you protect like a glass vase at this moment. So I don't want somebody else that's a left fielder DH that's also a constant injury concern and somebody that's going to be, they need to get somebody that can play center field, that can be flexible, that can move Chaz over to left, if they have to. But worst case scenario, Chaz is the center fielder next year. Jordan is back. Maybe they bring up somebody like, I don't know if Jake Myers is back as an option, but they've got Pedro Leon. That's potentially somebody that can do something out in the outfield. He's played center field and left field. So it's not terrible if Pedro Leon or Chas McCormick is your center fielder next year, or Chaz is playing left and with Pedro Leon. It's not a tragic thing at all. You still got a pretty darn good lineup. You still got pretty good defense, and you got some MVPs all around your infield.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Look, maybe if Yuli is one of those guys that the Astros believe could be that utility guy, replacing an Aledmus Diaz, so to speak, because he can play the left side of the infield. He could play first base. He could DH. I think that's a good option. The interesting thing to me is I'm sure you, like everybody else, read the Keith Law piece a couple of days ago talking about the Jose Abreu and his decline and all of that. And it was less about the decline that he'd really failed to prove in his piece there. And it just seemed more like he was interested in taking some pot shots at Jim Crane. But I'm interested in knowing, like, what indicators were there that Yuli Gurriel was going to hit this severe of a decline when he was winning a batting title in 2021? What evidence is there, real evidence, that Jose Abreu is about to hit a decline? They're not all fall off the cliff kind of things, but I mean, hell, even a steady decline over the course of the next 3 years is something that you'll take if you're the Houston Astros from a offensive productivity level. Now, he's not.
Just to be clear, he's 36 next year. He's not 39 in
Right.
what Yuli was this year. So let's make that clear. This is not like, oh my God, next year he's going to be terrible. 36, you could still be a pretty good player. But there was some evidence in the numbers last year that he was going the other way more. He wasn't pulling it as much. There was some things that were going on that maybe he's slipping a little bit, but him slipping a little bit is still pretty darn good as a first baseman.
Yeah, just look at the numbers. I mean, one of the most attractive numbers that I'd liked in some of your more fundamental statistics was the on base percentage. And from a career standpoint, I mean, it's just been terrific. It's been well above 340 each and every year for a career. But I found these numbers that I think you might find interesting relative to Jose Abreu. When you talk about plate discipline, which is probably the first thing that we heard about from him in terms of an offensive player. But then two, what about the clutch? 13 of his 22 hits on first pitches were extra base hits in 2022, best in baseball. 67 RBIs in innings 6 through 9 in 2022. That's top 5 in all of baseball. Almost a 560 batting average in 362 at bats, Robert, with runners in scoring position in 2022. That's 7th best in all of Major League Baseball. And 107 RBIs with 2 outs since the start of the 2020 season. That's best in all of baseball. That's what got me really excited about Jose Abreu. And look, it is about what you're paying him from 2023 to 2025, but it's also about the track record and why you feel the guy is worth paying nearly $20 million a year for on an already World Series championship team. I'm really excited about the guy. And even if there is a slight little dip in his overall numbers, you could do a heck of a lot worse. It's really going to hurt. It's really going to smart a little bit, Robert, if in fact you do get that massive decline for whatever reason. Maybe the injury bug just decides to bite him in the butt. Then yeah, you're paying a guy almost $20 million a year for the next 3 years. And how much baseball is he playing for? And when he is, how effective is he? Well, let's worry about that when the time comes, or if the time comes.
Yeah, this is all rich people's problems. And unfortunately, that's what you get with the Astros. Not unfortunately what you get with the Astros, but unfortunately we got to talk about the teams with poor people's problems like the Texans, and they're a constant soap opera. So before I do that, though, a quick heads up to check out our live Texans Browns post-game show on Sunday. It's Deshaun's return, so who knows what could happen. You might want to check us out. If you miss it, look for our live shows anytime under the live tab on our YouTube page, or check out your favorite podcast app. And yesterday was my weekly Rocket show with Frank from HTX Chop Shop. Me and Sean are going to get into Rockets when the Texans season ends a little bit. I'm sure he's looking forward to that. On Thursday morning, I'm posting our weekly NFL fantasy show with Andy Rio. And Friday morning, I'll be talking about the #1 ranked Houston Cougars with University of Houston insiders Sam Raz and Dunstan Rensick. What's up, Cougs house? Oh my goodness, they look good. Sean, what did you make of Lovie Smith getting a little testy with Chronicle beat writer Brooks Cabina during the Dolphins post game? Because you and I were talking at that time, so we didn't get a chance to hear it until afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's the second week in a row that he's really failed at the podium. If you remember, it was another similar tense moment after the Commanders game. Um, it's less than 30 minutes after a game. You're obviously, regardless of the situation, if you're a head coach and your team gets their brakes blown off of them like the Texans did, you've got to try to spin a positive on it. And that from a reporter standpoint of view, they want to talk about the bad. They want to know why. They want to know why such a poor offensive output. They want to know the answers to some real tough questions. And, yes, we've all at one point or another, inadvertently kind of gotten under Lovie Smith's skin, even in the weekly press conferences, never mind a post-game press conference, because I'm not even there for those. I'm usually in the locker room or, like you said, talking to you. But I didn't make too much of it. It's just you have to understand the position that he's in. I mean, there are some coaches that will come out like Jim Mora did years ago. We sucked. We were terrible. That was a piss poor effort. And da 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 da. It's one thing to do that when your expectations are at a certain point. Lovie Smith knows damn well the situation of this organization, but he's charged with developing young talent, teaching them the ropes of the NFL, and doing all of those things. And at the end of the day, he's there for, support and to be more. I heard somebody say this week, or maybe I read it somewhere, to be more presidential like at the podium. Okay, well, he's starting to crack there too. Okay, because David Culley, God bless, what would he have been like in this situation this season? I mean, as dumb as he sounded at the podium all last season, how dumb do you think he'd sound this? 3 and out, we're good. My God, the Texans.
And I think that's why I think the Texans media, it's not like they're hard on him, but they're a little harder on him because look, David Culley had 4 wins last year. Doesn't look like Lovie is going to have 4 wins. This team looks worse, which is kind of amazing because we thought they would have a little bit more talent this year, and it's the second year of Davis Mills. Now, I'm not going to throw the whole Davis Mills thing on Lovie's record because I don't think that he has much to do with Davis Mills regressing. But I also thought it was interesting, by the way, Sean, that Cal McNair standing in the back of the press conference. I attended a ton of Bill O'Brien press conferences. Don't recall Bob McNair at any of them unless he was involved. And let's just say, I find Cal's presence a little noteworthy.
Yeah, I asked somebody about that was actually there in the press conference. And what they told me was that it really wasn't that big of a deal. Cal went on that trip, brought his 9-year-old son, and it was just kind of an opportunity for Cal to take his son into a press conference and kind of.
I just find that an odd thing. Like, let's take my son into a press conference after we've lost, by a gajillion points and watch my coach getting drilled by the media. It's just, that's weird.
Yeah, it's weird, but you don't know that those things are going to happen, and
you don't really.
Well, you really don't know, and maybe there's where the real issue lies, Robert, is because once again, Lovie Smith, a large part of the reason why I believe that they decided to make him a head coach and he accepted, of course, who doesn't want to be a head coach? I actually asked him that question early in the season, maybe his first press conference of the year, is did he ever envision himself being a head coach in the NFL again after having not done it for 5-6 seasons since Tampa Bay? And he'd said, you're never content in this business. You always want to be the top guy. You always want that opportunity. And so I kind of found that fascinating for a guy, a football lifer, and has spent much of his time at the highest level, to take a job with this organization that is in the position that it is. You're a smart guy. You're not where you are if you're not.
Probably didn't think he was going to get another job, and there's a little money that's involved in that too.
Money. Hey, look, Lovie Smith has no problem taking Cal McNair's money, and most people wouldn't. Okay, David Culley, I don't know if he saw the writing on the wall, but he's obviously not having any problem taking $7 million over the course of the next 3 years of Cal McNair's money. No problem with that. But, Lovie is a teacher. Lovie is a mentor. Lovie is that that grandfatherly figure, and we'd be talking a lot more about this side of Lovey if in fact things didn't look so porous and poor and really despicable this year. We'd be talking a lot about that from Lovie Smith's personality and character traits, but we're not. It's bad football, and so we're gonna focus on the podium more times than not. But because he has handled the podium and failed really over the course of the last 2 weeks the way that he has, I think, depending on who Cal McNair is listening to these days, depending on if he's got that trusted advisor or advisors by his side, somebody that, his father did for years and years, then I think it is important and interesting to note that, hey, the state of the franchise that we're in, it's not going to be much, much better than it is now next year, though you're certainly hoping to see more progress and it show up in the win column, as you're not going to be gearing for that number 1 overall pick next season. You just hope that your coach is sending the right message through a microphone and a camera lens, just as he is in the locker room, because all of the players listen and read what is written. I say all the players, a lot of them do. A lot of them talk about it, and a lot of them have admitted as much over the course of the last couple of weeks. So that is all important stuff to Cal McNair, and he is more concerned with optics, believe it or not, than you and I think.
Speaking of optics, Tony Busby will be at Sunday's game with 10 of Deshaun's accusers, and I'm a little surprised, Sean, they'd want to be in the line of fire. The accusers would want to be, so to speak, and also surprised that as part of the settlement, it wasn't written that they wouldn't attend any of Deshaun's games or practices. Kind of surprised Rusty Hardin couldn't see this one coming.
I mean, maybe there was some language that Rusty Hardin, fought to try and get in some of this litigation and these agreements on these settlements, that there had to be this, separation, at least visual, which I think there probably will be. I think that'll be fairly easy for Deshaun Watson to avoid these. Is he going to be driving in on a bus and walking up the tunnel? Is there going to be protesters? Are there going to be chants? Is he going to hear and see this stuff? Maybe, maybe not. He's certainly going to know that it's there. But I think I, for one, was not shocked, was not surprised at all when I saw that report yesterday about Busby and there being at least, I think it's at least 10 women that are going to be there. It could be more, could be less. You never know who decides to back out. But I was not surprised at all, because look, this is Tony Busby's time, and the message that he wants to send to his clients, the accusers, is that, hey, yeah, we've been heard, but this thing's not over. And that's exactly the sentiment. They want to be seen. They want to continue to be heard, because this will not soon be forgotten. And they don't want it to just automatically become about football. I think in their eyes, it makes the road for Deshaun Watson that much easier if, in fact, they just go away, given the court settlement. This is going to be a fight for a long time. And Deshaun Watson, I think it's going to be interesting to see how he decides to handle life going forward as an NFL quarterback with, having gone through what he did unto himself over the course of the last 2 years.
Have you watched much of Team USA? You into the World Cup at all? Goal.
Yeah, man, that was a fantastic goal. I mean, a goal like that, that was like in the 38th minute of the game the other day. And that felt like it was in the 90th minute at that time. I mean, the excitement level that was in this household was off the charts, and this soccer for me is kind of like the Olympics. You don't really care about it unless it's, every 4 years or whatever. Yeah. And that's fine. But it's Team USA. That's my team. That's your team. That's everybody's team. It's America's team. That goal was phenomenal. I couldn't tell, if Pulisic actually kicked the ball in himself, or if it was the Iranian player, from the angle that it initially showed on the TV. And when they showed the angle from behind the goal, I was like, oh my God, that made it even that much more phenomenal, because the assist, the header, was one of the best passes that I've ever seen at that level of competition. It was tremendous.
Yeah, I don't consider myself a soccer junkie, but I agree. It's like the Olympics. And I go in with no expectations for Team USA, maybe stating the obvious, but getting out of the group stage with a very young, inexperienced team after not qualifying 4 years ago, that's the victory. It's a big victory right there, regardless of what happens against the Dutch. And I don't claim to be smart enough to critique most of the coaching strategy, but I'm hearing analysts say this, and this is something I was thinking. I just find it odd they're carrying 3 goalkeepers and haven't played one of their most talented players, Gio Reyna, considering their style of play, leaves most of these guys looking like they're gassed 3/4 of the way through the match. And that's their style of play. So that I found a little odd.
Yeah, and I can't speak to that necessarily because I think it certainly is heavily dependent upon the opponent, and I'm not going to begin to try and break down, Iranian soccer or any of their previous opponents or who's even coming up. But I will say this: those dudes are hungry, and because they're young, they are some of the most one of the more athletic groups that I've seen from Team USA Soccer. And the way that they played that game yesterday, they controlled the ball and they set the tone immediately by controlling the ball in that first half of play. And to me, look, these are greatly long stretches. I mean, those guys were exhausted even by the 60th minute of that game yesterday. They
Well,
were just
that's what
exhausted.
happened against Wales and against England. They're getting exhausted because of their style of play, and it's a
Yeah.
hard style of play, and it takes a lot out of you. So,
But it
yeah,
takes a lot.
like I said, when do you ever use three goalies in World Cup? You're
Yeah.
playing. If you're lucky, you're getting out of the group stage, which means 3 games, and so that means you got to the fourth game. And I mean, I just find that odd. But speaking of the goalie, I got to talk about Matt Turner because he's been awesome. I can't believe this kid didn't even play soccer till he was 16, a total walk on at Fairfield University, rode the bench his first 2 years in college. He wasn't drafted by the MLS. This is your Rocky story right here.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you hear about these things, every so often, and I'm glad that U.S. Soccer finally has one of them because it's what makes the team kind of so special, so intriguing. Is because of a story like that, and you talk about the young and inexperienced, players that they do have. I will say this just to make one more point. Their style of play, which is exhausting for them, certainly because of how aggressive that they are. It takes a lot out of the opponent as well. And I think, that's a credit to the coach of how much work that he puts his guys in. That's a credit to the training staff. That's a credit to just the preparation. It's a style of play, quite frankly, that I feel like the Houston Rockets should probably try to actually employ because with their athleticism and their drive, which I don't feel like is always there, but just based simply on their athleticism and their youth, they should be boat racing guys up and down the floor every single night and playing exhausted and at the same time exhausting the opponent. And I think the Rockets are a talented enough team to where if they actually employed a similar stylistic sort of play like that, they'd be a little bit more successful at the end of games than they are.
You just hit something that's really important. Having three goalies when you are not going to use three goalies is kind of like not having a fast point guard that's a veteran when you really need a fast point guard that's a veteran if you're going to play fast. And Kevin Porter, one of my things with him is you can't play fast because he's not a real fast guy. He's got good quickness in a half court situation, but he's not your John Wall that's, I hate to say the word John Wall, that's speeding up and down the court. But that's really something that I feel like the Rockets could use, is that type of player. Again, go back and listen to me and Frank. We talk everything that's going on with the Rockets because there's a lot going on with them right now. I want to go back to the Texans and just ask you one quick thing before we go, because you and I are going to be talking Texans in a few days here. They've got a 2-game lead for the first pick in the draft. Cleveland losses helped the Texans, other draft picks. So, Sean, is the best thing for the Texans' future a Texans win this week?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is, but you're also presuming that Deshaun Watson is going to pick up right where he left off, and you're also going to presume that even with Deshaun Watson, this team has been largely a roller coaster. And aside from their quarterback play, Jacoby Brissett has put together one of the best seasons of his career. He hasn't played bad football. He's done actually a really good job of keeping them in games. Hell, he just beat Tom Brady a couple of days ago against that Tampa Bay Buck defense. Not only a fourth quarter comeback drive to tie and send it to overtime, but he beat him in overtime. And, what a hell of an ordeal to have to sit after a game like that, to where it gives you that much more hope. They've got a 9% chance to make the playoffs. A victory over the Texans could bump them up to 10, 11, 12%. Another victory after that, I think they got the Ravens following that. I can't remember. But they could see their playoff chances increase all the way up to 35, 40% over the course of the next 3 weeks, depending on, too, how things break down elsewhere in that division. So it's very real for them. A Texans win would certainly, it would behoove them to win this week. How possible is it? These two teams are literally at the opposite end of the spectrum from each other in terms of what the Texans offense has been doing versus what the Cleveland Browns defense has been doing across the board. And I'm not exaggerating. As bad as this Houston Texans team has been, it should be way worse this Sunday against the Cleveland Browns.
Is Kyle Allen still the quarterback? Have you heard from Lovie this week?
Yeah, he spoke today. Kyle Allen was at the podium, and obviously, word of the day, as it was last week, execution. All
right. It should be not interesting. I said I was going to say interesting, but no, not interesting. Kyle Allen, quarterback, and the Texans doing their thing. The interesting thing is going to be Deshaun, I guess, the Deshaun circus and everything. You and I will be talking about this, though, on Sunday, and please let it be close so we can have some fun with this game.
Oh, man, how awesome would it be to see Kyle Allen do exactly what Jacoby Brissett did, opposite Deshaun Watson, this Sunday, and lead his team down the field to victory. Or if the Texans defense, comes up with some big stops late, you get a Jerry Hughes or a Mario Addison sack or a Obo sack on Watson to end the game. How tremendous would that be?
All right. Until you and I talk, I just got 3 final letters for you. USA. USA, USA.
There you go, baby. There you go. I'll give you 2 words. Go Cougs.
Yeah.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Don't forget to follow Houston Sports Talk on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, the Google Podcast app, or the Stitcher app. You can support us by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes or by telling your friends about us. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.